Hello everybody, and welcome to the tutor review for week 1 of English as a Medium of Instruction for Academics. I think you know our faces now. We're Rob and Mary in Southampton. What we're going to do today is give you some advice as to how we think you can get the most out of the MOOC, and we'll just pick out a few things that have arisen during the week that we'd like to comment on, and then point you towards next week and what we'd like you to do for next week. Okay, so I'm going to start by 1 or 2 tips for the best use of the MOOC. And if I tell you to go backwards, that's going to sound a little bit strange, but in the context of our MOOC, those of you who started very promptly at the beginning and are really ahead of the field, ahead of the other students in the sense of working through the steps very, very quickly, we'd like you not to stop, obviously, keep going, but at the same time to look back at the comments that have been made by other people. Now, believe it or not, people start joining the MOOC up until the very, very last day. So there are people who have really interesting things to say, but you don't realize this unless you actually look backwards, deliberately go back and have a look. And realize as well that we are trying to build a little community here. And the way to build that community is to acknowledge the presence of other people and to show to them that you've read what they've written and that you like it. So a simple like can mean a lot to another person. Even more, if you can comment, that's wonderful. And please don't feel that in commenting you have to say something very wise or profound. Just ask a question, a simple question, and that will be greatly appreciated by the person who wrote the original comment. So please do that. And it's by that and by knowing that somebody in another country has read what you said, it can mean a lot to the person who wrote it. And we do realise as well that for some of you, perhaps if you've never used a MOOC before, that to write in public can be scary. It's easy for me to say, but please try and take the risk, even if it's only a few words, a short sentence. But if you can, find the courage, overcome your fear, you know, that feeling of being a bit scared of doing it. You will feel really good if you can write something that other people all around the world can read. So other things that we think you might like to know about the way we use the MOOC. Rob and I obviously read our comments, and we can't comment on everything that you've said. You know, we just don't have the time. We're working teachers like you. But we do read what you're writing. And if we see something that we think, oh, everybody should read this, then we pin it. And that means it goes to the top of that step. And other comments come in after it, but that is fixed at the top of the step. And a pinned comment means that we like what you've said, or we think it's really useful, or you've said it in a perhaps a surprising way or an interesting way. Perhaps it's controversial what you've said, but it means that we'd like everybody to read this comment. So look at the pins. They can be really interesting. And the other thing I'd like to say, just before I hand over to Rob for a few points from his reading of your comments, I'd like you to think and reflect on where you are now in week 1, where you are with regard to your thinking, and where you are with your thinking, not just about language, but about pedagogy, your social network with regard to teachers, and the networks that you're in where you perhaps share ideas and discuss things. Where are you now, and then I hope to ask you the same question at the end, because I'd like you to then reflect on the change that you see, the change in any of these aspects, whether it's your social network. Are you telling people about what you're doing on your MOOC? Are you going out and telling your colleagues, your friends, anybody, about the MOOC that you're doing? Think about how you're feeling about it. I've made my first public comment that the rest of the world are reading, something like that. And are you beginning to change any ideas that you have about language, about pedagogy? We haven't spoken a lot about intercultural communication, but that, comes in enormously into our work in the weeks to come. So think of this as a marker, and then there'll be a marker at the end of the MOOC. And we hope that there'll be a change. For some people, it could be a big change. For others, just a little change. What will that change be? And then, more importantly, what will you do with that change? All right, over to you, Rob. And I wonder what you'd like to say on some of the things that you've read during the week.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, I just wanted to say that I've been really happy with the focus. I think we've got a really strong focus for the kind of communication and the kind of dialogue that we wanted to see on the MOOC. So I think I define this as a focus on learners and a focus on learning, whereby I think people discussing, whether English as a medium of education is a good thing, whether it's whether they can implement it in a positive way, whether they see globalization as a positive thing for them. I think lots of people are focusing on what they can achieve with their learners, and that's the key, because that makes the conversation meaningful, and it makes the various backgrounds and expertise that people have and bring into the MOOC more important, because we try to ask questions that aren't just superficial. So what's the first step you should take, when you're embarking on an EMI module? So you're trying to teach through English. What questions do you ask? Of course, you ask questions about the learners, questions about what they can do. Do you accept other languages in EMI? Of course, it depends on the learners. Like, how you use different languages in the room depends on what languages are present, what kind of culture there is in the room around communication. And I think it's a really positive start, because I think people are realizing that communication is the most important thing in English as a medium of education. But at the same time, we have to think, what makes successful communication in your setting for your students with your learning goals? And I think that lots of the comments we've had, and I mean lots of the comments we've had, have been really focused on that. So as Mary said, we'd really encourage you to look back, talk to other people, communicate with other people, because there are lots of similar comments, and I can see over the 4 weeks we might find really interesting avenues of discussion. I'm sure lots of people have taught one class where they have one successful strategy and another class where it doesn't quite work the same way because of the goals or because of the students. So yeah, just say thank you very much. Really happy with the comments, and yes, looking forward to week 2. And that's back to you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Rob. Yes, I'm so looking forward to week 2, actually. This has started so well. It's wonderful. Anyway, just a couple more points I'd like to make. I don't really like to single people out, but I will do just now. April made a very interesting analogy, and excuse me for looking down, but I'm reading from the notes that I made. She wrote, "Every speaker of English starts to own English as he starts to speak English, and that person brings his own idiosyncrasies, culture, beliefs, and ideologies in communication to the English language." And this is what tickled me. It's like the menu of McDonald's in different countries. The menu items are added with the distinct flavour from the country the store is located. And I think that is a helpful analogy that you might be able to take forward in your discussions, especially if you're perhaps explaining ELF and the different ways of speaking English that we find all over the world now. This might be a helpful analogy for some of you with some audiences. I'd like to say that as well as bringing flavour, I'd like to see colour and vibrancy being brought to the English language by the different users all over the world. And this is what makes it so fascinating to study and observe being used by speakers and all over the world. I don't know if it was April or somebody else. Oh, it was Myla spoke about flexibility, and that actually was a word that popped up in the mouths of a number of people during my reading of your comments. Flexibility, and this is such a contrast to the set in stone attitudes of language teaching in the past, possibly still today actually for some speakers and teachers. But flexibility is key, and that acceptance of flexibility, I think, helps when we're in our present world. And I'm thinking that in the big sense, you know, the present world, everything that we're having to deal with at the moment. In our teaching, we have to be able to teach online, remotely. We have to be able to teach face-to-face in the classroom. We have to be able to teach in a hybrid situation. But life today is flexible. So it would be rather strange if the language were rigid. It's like flexibility is our way of life. Somebody said that the only thing that never changes is the fact that everything changes. You know, we have to live with change, and so we have to live with changing language and changing attitudes to language, and just kind of go with it and understand contexts and understand the people that are using the language in their various ways for various reasons. So suggesting that language is rigid, you know, just is out of kilter with the rest of our world. I've got one more thing that I need to say for next week, but I wondered if there was anything else you wanted to say, Rob, before we close today's tutor review.
Yeah, I was in perfect agreement with what you said there, and yeah, I would second that. And that was the other point I really wanted to say was, yeah, that and sometimes that when you're dealing with people speaking English as an additional language, there's sometimes an urge to prescribe more than you would in an L1 situation, because we've taught many British students, and no one would say you need to speak like I do. You know, I'm the teacher, you should speak like me. Because if you're teaching young British people, of course they speak very differently from how I speak, for example. You know, sometimes they can speak in a way that I don't understand. But then when people find themselves teaching people who speak English as an additional language, the language teacher brain can come in, and they remember how they learnt language and were prescribed, this is how you should speak. And you start being more evaluative of the language in a way that you don't in your first language. So I think a useful exercise is to think about how you communicate in your first language, with tolerance, with acceptance, with a focus on communication. And as you say, be flexible where there is diversity in the room. So yeah, so thank you, Mary. That's, yeah, really good point.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end of this tutor review. Can we encourage you to continue in this marvelous way that you've started by, you know, reading and absorbing and making fantastic contributions to the conversation. And let's just go beyond making comments and really making it a conversation, a discussion. All right. And that goes for the conversation and the discussion with me and Rob too. because, you know, please feel free to ask us questions. You know, what do you want to say to us? What do you want to talk to us about? So to do this, you need to go to week 2 and you need to go to step 2.21. 2.21. That is where next week's tutor review will appear. So if before let's say next Friday, if you could put any questions in there or comments that are specifically for us, then we can pick up on them next week. All right. So I wish you a really good week. I hope everything goes well for you in your teaching and your life, whether you're online or face to face in the classroom. I hope everything goes really, really well. We're looking forward tremendously to hearing from you in the comments, and we will see you next week. Okay? So that's bye-bye from Rob and me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.